Hello and welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be. My name is Paul Marca. I'm delighted to be hosting this webinar with my very good friend, Perry Klebahn. Before I get a chance to introduce him, just want to say hello. We have folks from all over the globe, including folks, it looks like, exercising, getting things done during the day. So thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you. I had a chance to work at Stanford for over 30 years. And one of my biggest pleasures was working with this guy, Perry Klebahn, who you'll be hearing from in a moment. Uh, we had a chance to do something sort of unique and interesting in the education space, is really try to capture the design thinking and innovation and put it online to expose many, many more students and learners across the globe to the content that sort of resides at Stanford University. My old group, the CGOE at Stanford, the Center for Online and Global Education, continues to do that good work, also with Perry. And my job today is to really try to navigate through this next few minutes here with you. Just so you know, by way of ground rules, this is a standard webinar meeting. So please, when you come in, do mute your mics. We're going to have a chance a little later to have open discussion and dialogue. So if you have a burning question, you have two options. One is, of course, the chat, as you might use that. And the second is we'll have an open mic discussion session sort of at the end of the toward the end of the program. We'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes to engage. I want to thank my colleague Zamir Shuko, who has been behind the scenes creating the impetus for this. And what drives us, he and I are co-directors of the Luminarian Fellowship. Our goal there is to try to drive innovation from art and sort of, the brains of the Einsteins and the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs of the world to really much more of a discipline. And our focus in trying to do that is recognizing that we don't have all the answers, even though we have some affiliation with Stanford, and you'll hear from us, an adjunct faculty member at Stanford. But we want to drive to the questions and build community to crowdsource those answers. So it's this spirit that we built Luminarian Fellowship. We'll have a program at Stanford, and Zamir will share a little bit more about that in a few moments. And we know that consistency is key. Consistency of the dialogue, having these conversations, spurring these thoughts. So we're absolutely delighted that you could join us here for what I hope will be sort of a fireside coffee chat. Perry and I get together frequently, and we've had some of these discussions, and I thought, boy, this is going to be great. We got to share this insight for more information. We're here to talk about AI Unleashed, supercharging innovation, prototyping for the future. And Perry has some sort of hands-on expertise. When I was at Stanford, one of the things I loved about Perry as a true innovator is everybody was talking about AI and the challenges it presented for education. AI is cheating. What does education mean? What are we doing? Many faculty and sort of were confused and concerned about this. Perry and his colleague at the Stockholm School of Economics, Sebastian Krakowski, ran to the light. They said, hey, how can we experiment and pilot with things that might be really interesting? So that same spirit exists in the messages and the sharing that we'll have today in the sort of prototyping. I got a chance now to introduce Perry briefly. He's a seasoned entrepreneur. He's done everything in sort of corporate startup landscape, sort of executive leadership, has coached and educated leaders from around the globe. We did some work way back in the day in the UAE. So he's a seasoned entrepreneur, product designer. I think the key is that he's actually invented a product at Stanford while he was there and created a company. And sort of we'll talk a little bit about that, and sort of focused with Atlas Snowshoe Company, really just designing the modern snowshoe. He went on to actually work at Patagonia. He has experience turning around Timbuktu, and this kind of experience brings both, I will call it the small world startup and the big corporate perspectives that I think you will enjoy. He's also one of our Luminarian distinguished fellows as part of our activities with Innovera, who is driving and powering the Luminarian Fellowship. So, Perry, well, let's get started. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
It's so great to have you. I'm going to you have an incredible background, and we're delighted to hear and listen. So I'm going to jump in based on your sort of diverse set of experiences, and really focus in on starting with the sort of invention and innovation of the Atlas snowshoe and the modern snowshoe. Can you just walk us through that story and maybe share a little bit more about your experience there?
You can see they're up there on the top of the thing. So if you look, I don't want to pull them down, but there's wood snowshoes up there. So the innovation was, and this is way back in the 90s. So at the time I was graduating from Stanford, I was in a program called product design, which is now the design pro became the design school where I teach. And I'd broken my leg. And I went up with friends to a place near San Francisco, Lake Tahoe, where they were going to go skiing. And I thought, oh, I'm going to try snowshoeing because I can't really ski. So I'm going to try it. And these products, these old wood snowshoes, weighed about 10 pounds a piece. So very heavy. And they didn't really work that well. And they required you to varnish them. And they just were made of really wacky materials. And they were kind of fragile, made of wood. And so I had the idea, well, maybe this could be better. So I went back and iterated and, every week would build more prototypes and go up to the snow and test them and ultimately came up with a sort of a design that had, lightweight titanium or aluminum and other composite materials. And it just offered a much more pleasing experience to get out on the snow and do this kind of stuff for those that wanted to. Ultimately, it was stuff I sold to um, the utility companies that needed to access their lines in the winter. It created all kinds of interesting offshoots and was a really fun ride for about close to 10 years. I did that and I had a factory. I designed them. I built them. It was a terrific ride and it's one that I think makes me super passionate about startups. So it was really an exercise in iteration. And it's something I learned a lot from how long it took to get something that was actually really resonating with the market. Was if I really look back at my journals, it was, years to do that, which is something I do a lot in the programs at Stanford, is try to get students to understand how
So,
long.
so I know we've chatted offline about this many times, and so thinking about the product creation and the sort of invention part,
Yeah.
how would you describe that vis-a-vis the sort of marketing and sales action and motions that you needed to create in order to actually sell a product or service, right? In this case, your product.
I'll use this. So I'll share a couple of images. Because it's what I did at Stanford, the program I was in was, I don't know what it was called. It's like your capstone project in this program with engineers, right? And I happened to start a business in it. I got invited back to teach that starting in the 90s, which is how I got my position at Stanford. I kept teaching this class every spring. This class has morphed into currently what is the Launchpad program at Stanford. And it's kind of based, I'm going to share these things. So I'm going to share these images, and my hope is they quickly sort of allow us to, if you don't believe these things, you should, or you don't want to talk more about these things, it's a good chance to get off the webinar because these sort of largely drive my work at Stanford, both in leadership programs. I do programs around teaching students to lead teams without authority. A lot of them become product managers. Those who've been product managers, they're the roles that, in my opinion, run the companies. And such an important role. There's not really much training out there for how to lead with influence. So 1 in 20 is the ratio of when I look back at Launchpad data. So Launchpad is a program that has, you can look it up, launchpad.stanford.edu. It's 15 years in the making. Started with a fellow, Michael Deering, who's one of the original guys at eBay. We did it for 5 years together, and it's been largely based on a couple of core ideas. Here it is. So this is the ratio of successes to failures. When we looked at prototyping and how many things early stage innovators need to put out in the world. By the way, I did a book called Idea Flow. We looked at companies like Doritos, McDonald's, airline companies, insurance companies. When we really looked at their processes, this ratio held true, about 1 in 20. so the implications to me are really huge. If you ask me about the snowshoe company, I don't remember that, it took close to 3 years to get a product right. And I was iterating and iterating and iterating, doing multiple versions every week. And the same thing then with marketing and all these go-to-market strategies. It's something we're relentless about. This is the reality. Bob Sutton and Andy Hargadon did some research that I've sort of reworked, and it's driven a lot of the scale I seek using AI tools. So it gives you a sense of like what we're after here. If I go backwards to this innovation funnel and you have 2 to 3 successful outcomes in the marketplace, you backtrack, it's about 4,000 ideas, 226 prototypes, 12 things being incubated or sustained as an offer. That's sort of mind-blowing, right? So the 1 in 20 ratio holds true. And we'll talk about the implications in a second. I want to give you one other thing. The other thing is the average time with startups in the Launchpad program. So I have 12 startups a year, usually 6 make it to market, and a year later there's 3 left each year. So that's my funnel. The thing I'm most proud of is of those founders that don't get companies on the first bat, almost 60% get a second act and get a company within the next couple of years on something else. But the reality is there's a long period of time of this relentless trial and error. And I think that's the interesting thing. If you're in a company or in a startup, is like I think largely in the classes I'm working on and the students I work with, I'm relentless about teaching them that it's not so much about getting things right, because you're going to get things right so rarely if you're in the innovation game. It's how quickly can you learn from mistakes and how quickly can you do experiments. And that's where, I have done a lot of work in the last 24 months, kind of ripping down all of the curriculum and beginning to use and integrate AI tools with frankly some mixed results. And we'll get into that in a little bit, I know, but the AI tools offer the ability to use experiments quickly, but it's the ability to process and make sense of them and make meaning is not as clear.
Yeah, so I just want to sort of jump in. First of all, thank you again. You're jumping into. Some of you have just joined. This is a standard webinar. If you have questions for Perry, you have 2 choices. One is enter the chat, or in the last 10 to 15 minutes, we'll have an open mic session if you want to sort of voice. And I'm going to encourage you, if we do that, to put on your prompt engineering question hat and make those nice and pithy so we can get to as many as possible. Talking with Perry Klebahn, adjunct faculty member at Stanford, and sort of big company executive as well as a startup effort. We just chatted a little bit about sort of the journey and the numbers. And so if numbers generation is critical, of course, artificial intelligence is a perfect tool to do that. And now you're using sort of AI, not just as sort of an experiment, but rather a part of the class. Can you talk a little bit about the Launchpad experience you've had with AI, and
Yeah.
what are you finding?
Yeah. So if you take as a premise that, for example, you're going to build literally hundreds of prototypes to get a couple of directions worth pursuing, then one of the things that AI offers, amongst many, is the ability to produce some of these prototypes very, very quickly. So we did a bunch of different things. So, I'll share again, I'll show you some of this is, examples of some student work from, oh, hold on. It's going to break the internet. Let's see. So we use a product V0 or Lovable. You can use either. I suggest whatever you're on, you all start using the same thing in your organization, because that got really confusing. But these are built on V0, so a Vercel product, just because it's super easy and it can really do some interesting coding. This is a product or a startup rep up that wanted to sort of do some upcycling of fabrics, a lot of fabrics. My experience with Patagonia is very true. There's loads and loads of wasted raw material, and they're super passionate about building a marketplace for it. So here they go. So one of the challenges with AI is you move from idea to production level output really quickly. So this is a pretty good website. That's the standard format. They've done all the usability. It's you could say, oh, this is a for real, product. There's some that are at different levels. A lot of these have gone down. And this is another Physio AI. They're prototyping one of their offers. So on virtual PT services. Um, Hexagon, this is one that's actually in an accelerator now, Pair VC. But these are early stage prototypes. They're prototyping offers. They're trying to get people to convert. They're doing demand testing. So they've got many, many different versions of these. They all go production level really, really quickly. And I thought, oh, this is I personally thought this is the answer. Like, this is going to be great. Let's just massive parallel experimentation. The data is there. This should be really effective. What I saw was what's really cool is the students were putting out stuff very, very quickly, and there's a deep empowerment for particularly the non-technical students or the students that were more intimidated by the technology to see they could put stuff out in the world really quickly and have it be great. But as we dug into it, one is the parallel experiments produce so much data so quickly. For example, on 1 week alone, we used Reddit as a prototyping area. People were doing posts inside of Reddit. And one group of students, so this is 12 startups, were sort of mining for needs and doing a bunch of prototyping around needs and understanding customer needs. And they generated 108,000 posts. So it's like, oh. And then processing those and understanding those, we saw some limitations to some of the tools, meaning looking for insights and understanding human reactions is an area of intuition and understanding emotions and noticing things and being surprised. These are things that the AI models are not good at. They're not good at surprise. They would a lot of times average out outlier comments from customers unless we dug into it. And so we began to sort of work in teams. So the idea is that then we sort of shifted to like, okay, if we're generating all this data, maybe we have 3 startup teams work together on one startup at a time because they just have more human eyeballs and it's not so overwhelming to process all this. So I'm kind of torn. It was super interesting. We leveled up the amount of prototyping. So previous years, I had maybe, because of things like Squarespace and Figma, hopefully everybody's using Figma, that was a great no-code tool. Those tools were fabulous, right? So we were building on the order of maybe 20 to 30 prototypes. For a business to consumer, that would be maybe websites. For business to business, it would be email campaigns with different types of landing pages or presentations. And we're looking at conversions. We're very much focused on the demand side before moving on, your earlier question, before moving on to like marketing or go to market. We're just trying to see, where does it resonate and what does it solve? We moved up to on the order of 100, so, and I want to move that number much, much higher, because the theory is that would be better. Like, we'll get through this a lot faster. What I'm noticing is when we did full agentic versions, so we would sometimes campaign stuff and have agents respond to requests from customers. There was and I shared with Paul this. What I noticed is there was a lot of, frankly, disengagement. The prototypes would run autonomously, but I've never seen the founders as sort of like disconnected from the actual experimentation and then for the production. So there's something about agency and building, I think. This is what I'm doing with Sebastian in the fall, is digging into these questions. I wonder how to make sure the human has some agency in building these things, and they're not moving so fast with so much volume that it's something that's not even mine anymore, which is what I saw for the first time, is founders actually talking about some of their prototypes in the third person. It's not their prototype, it's a prototype. And then the other thing is the amount of data generated. It's just truly phenomenal. And we were overwhelmed as a teaching. We're really excited, but I couldn't keep up, not even a chance. You
So
know,
one couple things that occurred to me was, so I want you to share the story of one of the prototypes. I think there was you shared when we had coffee, the sort of the backpack, and then there was a particular, and I think the student group missed it as and sort of talk about, and there was a women's advocacy talk about that story, because it's really interesting about how you can generate a lot of information but miss the obvious opportunities.
yeah. So how many people have you used things like image generation tools? Maybe like raise your hand or drop something in chat. Have you used tools like Visual Electric? All right, so here's what these kind of tools are capable of. So this was one we use. There's a bunch you can use. We chose to use Visual Electric. I think it's really strong as a image generator. So here's my misspelled prompt: backpack for eating on the go and carrying a laptop. So yeah, my spelling's always terrible. No exceptions here, but it's amazing. So this generated a bunch of images, and then you could go through and sort of, if I wanted to, I could show you there's a little panel on the side, and I could say I want it to be a little bit more edgy. I want it to be a little bit more fashionable. I want it, so whatever. But so think about this. We challenged students to launch a backpack company. Who would be a target user? What would be a pain point? What would be a key feature? I chose to campaign one around a problem I've noticed, or I wish I had, is I never bring hot food for lunch because I just don't have a place that wouldn't like make all my papers, humidified and all that kind of stuff in backpack. So here I am. I've gone from a concept this quickly, maybe this compiled for 15, 20 seconds. I've now got the image. I can go to a place like Vercel or the Wix AI builder if you want to do something incredibly simple, and I can have a website built. Okay, so now I can choose to post that to Reddit threads. I can choose to, if sometimes you get knocked off those, but I can get it out there. I can also go to Facebook and put it up. So we did a bunch of different versions to show it. So we just said, hey, everybody's going to launch a backpack company. We want to teach you this technique. So built the images, built it on a pain point, put the same very short copy into things like ChatGPT to sort of write some website copy. You literally could drop the same line here. It'll go ahead and write a whole set of copies. So we did it unbelievably fast. One of the students had an insight or an idea, which was, what if there was a compartment for smelly clothing? I've gone to the gym and I have sweaty clothing, but I got to go around for the whole day. How's that going to work? What if a backpack can deal with that? So he put an image in. I don't have his images because these things are all gone now. This was mine, but so we went ahead and campaigned him on Facebook using a tool called Autos, AUDOS. You have to go to Instagram anyway. It's a couple friends who started it. It was super interesting, which will basically take your assets. What I mean by assets is the website, the copy, all that kind of stuff. And then what they do is it drops into a programming effort. It'll program an agent with defaults, and the agent will then interact with customers that have questions. So we put this thing out there. This is one example. Put it out there, and I don't know, maybe 2 days go by and we come back to class, and the agents had interacted with, I think, on the order of a dozen customers answering questions, and two of the customers had left credit cards. They wanted the backpack so bad. So this is off of something that a student has spent, I don't know, no exaggeration, 15 minutes tops working on. The images have all gotten generated. All these things are out there. He could measure conversion rate of this and a bunch of other backpack ideas. This one I think was in the order of between 5 and 8%. And people were actually interested to pay. So I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I remember talking to the student, and his reaction was almost like I can't believe this went on, and I have no feelings about it whatsoever. It's just, I mean, we had a made up project, but it was still his idea. It's a very unique idea in the mix. It was a problem he had. He was interested in it. And I shared with Paul, I was struck by a lot of answers like that from students that, when we really went deep on AI and began to generate so much volume, it actually caused less of an engagement than I've seen with the older methods, and more of a state of um, uh, so much data coming in, I can't make sense of it, and not gonna not gonna even try. Um,
So,
one
so
of the things that happened in the thread also, another story was, um, I forget, a team of women, so a duo got together and they did a bunch of different backpacks for women in business, and they had a bunch of different use cases, so campaigned all these. And they did it on Reddit, and they generated loads and loads and loads of feedback. And one of the things that was fascinating was this, I thought, very sort of um, uh, harsh debate broke out between recent mothers saying their real problem was they didn't want a mom bag. They literally said mom bag. I don't want to look like a mom. I think they make me look stupid. I think they're dumb. And then there were all these arguments and sort of counterposts and all this stuff. But they had generated so much feedback with all of their prototypes on Reddit, they didn't even catch this. And I remember I'd split with a bunch of other people to read the feedback. And a friend of mine, John, who's an alumni of the program, was nice enough to come and help at these times to just read and try to we got to make sense of this. And we both noticed this argument that broke out. So we said, oh, that's interesting. So we told the folks that were running these experiments, these two really talented students, to say, hey, run some analysis and do the analysis. And they didn't pick up on this thing. Anything they ran through ChatGPT or Claude, it would edit out this particular thread, because in the slew of things, it was a pretty small thing, but it was, to me, it was clearly an expressed need, clearly expressed anxiety, clearly lots of emotion, something to be followed up on. And it was hard. I felt like, as an instructor, I can't really teach much about the instinct you need to have as an innovator. Like, you need to find these insights and then go explore them.
yeah.
But it was almost in the maze of information coming in. There's a good example of, like, be careful. Like, it's overwhelming. You might
Yeah.
lose something of value.
That's great. So thank you for those couple of great stories. The notion that a chat GPT or an AI tool can generate a product, and I don't have a stake in the game. I'm not interested in it,
Yeah.
right? And it could be wildly commercially successful, but I didn't create it. It's sort of, and then the other, which is generating so much data that you actually miss the opportunity. And as entrepreneurs and leaders in large companies, you've got to be looking for the friction points to reduce the friction to create opportunities, right? And this is something I think, as we move forward, we'll be curious to get the next report. The other thing that occurs to me is, to what extent might AI over time be able to identify sentiment analysis and sentiment so that it could find it? But let's save that for another day. I love the question that Saeed has asked here, and I'm just going to capture it. And by the way, I want to encourage you is in the next sort of 10 to 15 minutes or so, we're going to open it up to questions. So if you want to save yours for voice, great. If not, enter it in the chat, and I'm going to encourage you to keep those as tight as you can. So Saeed says, are there data showing that a structured approach to innovation, in addition to using AI, would increase the likelihood of success for projects that make it through the pipe, and or increase the number of projects that make it through? And I think one of the things that your class, if I'm to take that, and Asher noted this, your class is far better throughput than, sort of, I'll call it, most VC funds in terms of its success rate, both the first pass and the sort of secondary effort. 60% go on to do sort of cool things. So do you have any sort of, knowing that a good portion of our audience is in the corporate space, sort of any sort of thoughts around the sort of success pipe numbers through the pipeline?
Yeah, Scott Clemmer, you may have met Scott way back when. He moved on from Stanford and got just a great position down in San Diego. He's a colleague and a friend, and did some really terrific research on this idea of parallel prototyping. That's what I'm talking about, is the ability to, if I'm working on a project that is uncertain, which I would define as innovation, and therefore my likelihoods of being wrong are extraordinarily high. What I'm looking for is a vector, a direction to head. So one of the most effective ways, and Scott did lots of amazing research on this, and he's got very readable articles, so read them. And it's the kind of thing you could give to a team. as a leader in a company. I did it at Patagonia and said, hey, one of the problems is we have an idea and we build one prototype and we get kind of a yes or no answer. What if we built three and we got a maybe, sort of, no? And it's like, oh, the market's over here, So that's what we started doing, and it builds efficacy on teams, it builds momentum on teams. There's great research on this, but the idea is it acknowledges at the very beginning that I don't know, so I'm doing a bunch of parallel experiments, very, very different ones. I might offer to this target user, that target user, and that target user. I don't know who my customer is. Great. Let's see who responds and what happens. So that's the idea, that there is good research on that. That's great. What my hypothesis is okay, instead of doing, 3 or 4 prototypes, let's do 400. Let's do 4,000. Let's just go in and use AI agents to run some of the experimentation so we can get the results back. That sounds lovely. It's just math. It's like, oh, wouldn't that be great? But the scale of it and the complexity, and the ability for the human to be in the loop and actually be making thoughtful decisions and making meaning. There's a whole thing about, AI is unable to have this semantics. It's unable to, it's not going to make meaning of it. We've got to do that. So yes, it could deploy those experiments. I did that. And I'm seeing that there's a limitation to how much we can process and make meaning of. And I think there's going to be something, whether it's simply some research around how much can you do before you sort of don't have any of the emotional bandwidth any longer to process all this stuff, or are there ways to work in teams differently? If you're going to do this type of work, is it that you need a little sub team to actually make sense of stuff and be able to handle the influx and argue about it and talk about it? But that's kind of all over the place in the answer. But yes, there's good experimentation, data on parallel experiments. It's fascinating, actually, that it drives really effective discussion between team members, less argument, more alignment on needs, and less sort of fixation on solutions. So there's all great kind of stuff. Scott, you read this co-authors, great work on that for what we're talking for the last decade. This has been really good research. And the implementation side of it is harder than it sounds.
So you've alluded to something, I think, and a principle that certainly I've heard both at MIT. I worked with a company with a great CEO, Devaris Shah, who was focused on this, which is human in the loop. There's a recent MIT study that came out in the last couple of days, which sort of specifies a couple of surprising results. One is that ChatGPT is making me lazy. That is, I'm deferring all the research and all the stuff, and I'm losing. As a former Division I athlete at Stanford, use it or lose it. If you're not exercising the muscle, you won't. So the question I have for you is, you think about, you're leveraging and advocating AI. How are you thinking about sort of use it or lose it, and where's the rub where technology and we want to have a human in the loop as a design principle, and we also want to generate lots of ideas. How are you thinking about this relatively recent study?
Well, so what maybe it just unpacking sort of the latest thinking is one thing. When we went back and we looked at the kind of discussions we were having with all of these students. So I did a class that was really devoted to using AI to explore spaces called Launchpad, and then the Launchpad was these 12 founders. They have an idea, they want to go ahead. I did a class for, I think it was almost 50 students, all just working on these kinds of tools and exploring different areas. So I did a lot of work this year that was sort of not, don't want to clear, it wasn't research, but it generated a lot of insights that my hope is will drive some cool research in the fall. But this is the other thing I've thought a lot about, Paul, is one thing that was interesting this is a definition of innovation. Okay, so it's the combination of feasibility, viability, and desirability. Okay. One thing I noticed when I looked at that example of those 2 websites I showed you, those are students that have, just beginning to get stuff in front of customers and get some data and all these kind of things. And now they go build websites with Vercel that all look incredibly good. What was interesting was when we looked at the feedback from customers, the feedback was kind of interesting. It's largely got focused on um, feasibility and viability, meaning when you sort of looked at something finished as a customer, you began to pick apart the details, and there was a difference in the quality of the prototype. So with these AI tools, I thought, well, this is amazing. They go to production level. That's a good thing. I think it is a good thing. I think for early stage ideas, it gave the impression to the people that it was getting tested with that these were fully fleshed out ideas. And therefore the feedback was, I don't like that. This is unclear to me. What about the warranty? What about the, and so the students were sort of down this path of almost optimizing something and getting feedback about optimization and getting it sort of tweaked versus when we would do rougher prototypes and messier prototypes, it was much more about desirability. Do I even have a need? Would I ever even want to do this? That was sort of one of the things I think is maybe a lesson is we believe in Launchpad, it's about desirability first, viability second, and feasibility last. Organizations I've gone into like Patagonia or Timbuktu, it was precisely the opposite. Feasibility, like what can we build and what can we make? What can we make money doing? Great. Who do you think would buy that? So it's like it's so opposite. And the
Yeah.
biggest thing that in those companies was flipping it back around and getting it back to like, let's go explore some customer needs. Let's figure out what businesses we might want to be in, and then let's figure out how we do it. But let's not
It,
worry so much about that stuff. But I
it's a
think that
critical.
AI tools are mixing this all up a little bit.
Yeah, it's a critical point, right? It's customer focused innovation. What do customers want, and understanding those needs and opportunities in the dialogue that was missed, which is a really interesting story. I think that's where, again, a reminder to everyone is whether you're a large company or small, that you have to be thinking about what the customer might want and getting to that as quickly as possible. Identifying points of friction are absolutely critical. As you think about sort of it, we're going to shift in a minute to my colleague Zamir, who share a little bit more about what we're up to in terms of convening the community. But before we get there, sort of as you think about sort of the arc of your experience and these new AI tools, what 2 to 3 pieces of advice would you have for organizations large and small as they sort of consider what to do next? I know many companies are sort of struggling and or afraid our IP might get out there, and boy, what happens? And so, but what advice would you have for companies large and small?
Well, I think one thing is you control a lot as leaders on teams or participating on teams in terms of what you display interest in. If you are interested in these tools and these techniques, a couple of things I've seen effective on teams, and this is in the past companies I've been in, this is the executives that leave, is just that leave some of the programs to go to work, is what if you started a meeting with let's share something. It's either an article about AI that somebody's got, one person brings something, we're going to share something, or let's do a quick thing with a tool. Everybody open your laptop. Let's use that visualizer. I saw the guy and he said visual electric's really cool. You can do 10 of those images for free. It doesn't cost anything. It's like, go do it. It's not, don't do anything related to the business. I trust you. But let's all use the visualizer, generate an image for something, give them all a prompt, say, let's all generate an image for a mascot for our team or whatever. And I think you'll see the lights go on like, whoa, like this is way more powerful than I thought. What are the implications? What could it be? So that's one thing is demonstrate interest, bring an article, bring that MIT article, have everybody read it, talk about it for 5 minutes. What are the implications? We don't have to make a decision. By the way, everything's changing so much in AI. Having a strategy for AI that's like mapped out, I think it's early in the game to figure that out. But I think having a strategy for like, how do we talk about it? How do we socialize it? Are we going to be a team that actually is this clearly a technology that is going to be persistent, going to be part of our workflows? Let's start talking about it. That's one. And the other thing is looking for a project or looking for something that's discrete and small that you could use this for. It could be great. Let's use it. I mean, super small. Let's use it for the agenda for our meetings. Let's just fully commit though. We will use AI to develop all the agendas. for the next whatever number of meetings. And then let's talk about it. Talk about what was the benefit. Talk about how it was different. Talk about what it did, that we liked. Talk about what it offered that was unique. And I think that's, sort of having an area to explore. I think what a lot of larger organizations are doing is saying, wait, let's get it right, as opposed to where can we go get it wrong? Let's go get it wrong. Let's run toward using it in something that's low stakes, knowing it's just going to be a messy thing. But let's do that and share what we're learning. And also let's become experts. You can read so much of this research and reach out to folks like Paul, Zamir, and myself on LinkedIn. Like, what are you reading? I used to have some pretty good books here. This is an interesting one. You want to read about? I found this super interesting. Brian Christian, The Alignment Problem. He says a lot of cool. You can actually probably find a talk he does that we did. It's a little bit heavy, but so fascinating that all of the AI models are based on psychology. Skinner, reinforcement learning is something that works in humans and was applied to AI. So a lot of the breakthroughs, it goes through how a lot of the things we think about that are so interesting come directly from human thought patterns. I loaned out another book, Marvin Minsky is really interesting to read. One of the original MIT guys who was in the 60s and 70s writes about AI and what they were doing. And it's just, this stuff is fascinating that it took them, I think in the early 70s, took them, I forget it was, a matter of months to build a agent that could play chess pretty well, okay? It took them 6 years to build an agent that can control a little robot arm to put together a set of kids blocks. And it was like, it's this mind-blowing sort of stuff about, you really understand common sense is really hard to do in these models. And here's Brian Christian, 40 years later writing about it, saying it is still really hard. The common sense I saw with these students and being able to make sense of it was uniquely human. The agents were going on and doing derivative ideas, but it wasn't actually a sense-making activity. So super, super interesting. Thanks for posting that, Samir.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say is sort of lead and commit as leaders, and then sort of pilot and know that and find a discrete area where you can pilot and know that it's going to be messy. And the other thing that I would say is get some youngsters. Those of us with a bit of gray hair may be less willing to experiment, and so mixing novices and experts in this space, those of us with gray hair as novices, some of the youngsters as experts, is really an important way to drive sort of insight and change in organizations. So at this point, thank you. Sort of get ready to ask your questions. I'm going to turn it over to Zamir for a few minutes to just describe some of the things that we're hoping to do in convening this community, and we'll come back and Perry and I with some questions. So get ready.
Absolutely. Always love the talk. Thank you, Perry. A lot of interesting moments. I really like the details about what effect AI has on people, especially when it comes to startup prototyping. I've been in the world of AI and startups for many years, but right now things are developing so fast. And one of the things that we are building here at Luminarian Fellowship, I shared the link, and I'm going to share my quick presentation, few slides just to let you know what we're about. Let me see. Do you see my?
It was there for a minute and it went away.
And
you're back.
There you go.
Yep.
So Luminarian Fellowship is an exclusive collaboration between Stanford Engineering Center for Global and Online Education and Innovera, and we have amazing partners joining us. It's a year-long program engagement for executives in big companies to help them basically implement innovation and breakthrough technologies like artificial intelligence. So we are building this based on three main pillars, right? First of all is learning component, right? When we are surrounding the group of fellows with thought leaders like Perry and other people who are creating the top approaches, methodologies, best practices, writing amazing books about how to deal with innovation and how to work with AI. And there's so much happening right now. It's such a fast pace. And I agree that Now you got to be on top of things. So we are inviting fellows to come to Stanford for 3 days in September, and we're going to have an immersive summit, and it's going to be amazing. Looking at the program, I'm excited myself to be part of this. After the summit in September, we're going to do some online virtual keynotes, and of course, we're going to keep on engaging the community. And those who complete the program will receive a certificate from Stanford University. The second pillar of this program is connecting people together. First of all is the members, right? The fellowship is a membership kind of club where people meet each other. And again, they are C-level executives from different verticals, different countries. They will exchange a lot of important information between each other, and we want to help them build a peer-to-peer connection. We are creating special tools for that. And of course, we give them access to the Thought Leaders Network. The final component of this is doing, because every one of those people responsible for innovation, strategy, and growth is tasked with several large projects. So we want to surround those projects with the right knowledge base, right mentorship. We will provide the full hospitality for people who are coming here for the summit in September. So you get to live in a four-season hotel with the rest of the group. And we have a bunch of different frameworks that we're going to be helping people apply into their big corporate projects. And one of the key tools that we will be giving up to our fellows is the Innovera platform. Now, Innovera is the organization that is empowering this program, and I want to share a few things about this. Give me 1 second. First of all, we always start with the problem. And when we looked at the problem of innovation in large enterprises, we see that enormous amount of money is being spent. $1.5 trillion annually is spent to run innovative projects. And according to research, we see that almost 80% of companies, they do not really achieve the stated goals. And there's no clear evidence that you spend more on R&D, you get better financial results at the end. And when we started looking at other verticals and inside of the businesses, we saw that what is happening is every other business process has a supporting system with software, with processes, and everything else, with workflows. And innovation is the only one that is missing. So we decided to create a platform that can help big companies drive their innovation projects. And that platform consists out of three things. First of all, is proven methodologies, right? Like it was mentioned today, a lot of research was done on how innovation is being taken from idea stage to implementation to the market, etc. So there's these proven methods. Then there is the software component that is expediting everything. And we saw examples today how now you can build hundreds of prototypes, in a matter of days. And of course, there is an expert network that needs to be around this process in order to help drive it forward. Now, really quickly, when we talk about the methodologies, Innovera has compiled a set of programs that can take ideas basically stage by stage from different phases to commercialization. And it's a pretty fast process. And when I talk about the software component, we already have a working platform. It has a lot of tools in it. It's powered by agentic AI. It has dashboards. It helps to put all the projects in the innovation pipeline. You can see the execution of these projects as you go. So everything is in a controlled environment and enriched by a lot of data that this platform is operating with. And the final thought of this is right now, if you look at how innovation is done in corporations, is an ad hoc process. So our mission is we want to create a discipline around it and empower our colleagues, chief innovation officers, chief strategy officers inside of these large enterprises to drive these projects to success much faster with a higher rate of success. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I dropped a link about this program in the chat. It's called the Luminarian Fellowship. We will be extremely happy to see some of you join us. So if you're interested, check the website and fill out an application form, and we will talk to you after that. Thank you. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. I see a couple of questions popped in the chat, some of which Perry has answered, and I captured Saeed's question. Are there other people who are brave and willing to sort of come on mic and share a question or two for Perry? I've got tons more, and I can certainly fill the space, but want to turn it over to you all who might have questions. Anybody? And so, Perry, so just want to get back to one of the questions. I know many organizations. I talked to a lead at a large in a company. He's the innovation head, and he's really struggling with culture. Can you say a little bit more about, like, how have you seen large organizations, you can do a pilot and have pockets of, I'll call it, innovation insights in one area, but how do you drive that across a large organization? How do you get people sort of all on the bus as regards to sort of using these innovative tools and techniques?
Well, so Asher's question was kind of, I think, at the crux of like going into those companies I went into. So in a startup, you have the benefit if you're struggling for oxygen. So it's like you in a way you have to listen to the customer. So it's just different. Okay, so if I have a bunch of founders that really want to make a difference, I had these two founders started a company. It's not called Pure AI anymore, but it was a really cool technology that with your phone and images, you could see impurities in food. So they didn't know where to head and all this stuff. So we did a bunch of prototyping, and they thought their target user was, mothers that wanted to have clean food for their kids. And ultimately they ended up selling, of all things, to farmers that want to convert their farms to organic, because they actually have to check all of their produce on a regular cadence, and this was dramatically faster and cheaper and easier for them to implement, to do it this versus sending produce off to get sampled and tested. Anyway, when I see founders, if they are struggling, like they don't have any money, they gotta get some revenue proof to raise money, or or cash flow the company. So they're struggling to find a customer. They'll eventually find one. AI tools can help. I think it was helpful to have them do way more prototypes and try way more things. But ultimately, they're forced to go out there and sell at some point, or they run out of money and it's all done. When you're in a big company that has existing products, that you get very, very good at incrementally changing and keeping the offer good and subtly changing something, becoming a little bit more efficient, having strategic price increases to make your quarter. This becomes the way you innovate. One of the big things is, and it's what I wrote to Asher for his question, was at Patagonia in particular, and then Timbuktu the same, is finding a way to bring that desirability back in. What is desirable? What is the need we're solving? And then Clayton Christensen, what is the job to be done of our product? What is the thing that people need? So at Patagonia, one of the things that was super fun to do is just required all the senior leaders to work in the Patagonia stores a certain number of years. And in particular, they had to work at least 2 days at the holidays, which really taught them very clearly what people were looking for and what was desirable, what wasn't desirable. And it helped align so much. At Timbuktu, I invited customers in every Friday. So this is a bag company in the city, right above a factory. It was super fun, and the customers would just roll in. We would sometimes have beers from them. We would have drink, whatever. It's like, but we make it really fun. But the idea is everybody come out and talk to the customers. These are people we're serving. Let's hear about what they're up to. Let's hear about their commute. Let's hear about how they travel through the airport. Let's hear about what they're doing. Let's show them some of our prototypes. Let's invite them to see some sketches. And it's maybe a bit of it is being more open with your techniques, particularly in early stage projects, and not so worried about getting it right, or somebody asks about IP protection. It's like, we're so likely to be wrong. We're better just to show this to a customer. So that's what, sometimes called innovating in public. That's what we're doing with another sort of technique I was testing a lot in these classes, was also just using open innovation techniques. So I have a bunch of customers in, a bunch of people working, and we're just doing hackathon style iterations with AI tools. Tend to work better because at least you keep the customer need in there. But that might be a big thing. I think so. It's a very important question is how do you make sure that the sense sort of the foundation our innovative efforts we're working on are not the dominion of like, an insights department or somebody who read a bunch of data or we did a survey. Those are not sufficient. You need to interact directly with those customers, and the people doing the early stage design need to have a cadence of interacting with actual users.
Yeah, it's a tremendously important point. When I do my little workshops, I make sure that my advice to executives: if you're not out talking to a customer every week, you're probably not doing the right thing. Everyone in large organizations, operations take over because that's core and that'll drive revenues and that'll keep everybody employed. And operations are the point of pain relative to survivability of the companies.
Yeah.
I see, Dan, you may have the last question as we wrap up. Go.
Oh, you're on mute there, Dan. There you go.
I was just had to find that button first, right? Thanks very much, guys. It's been very enlightening. The question I've got is the theme today seems to be use AI to solve everything versus using it to structure the unstructured and then using code for repeat tasks. From a standpoint of taking it to businesses, which do you think is better?
So here's my experience was I stayed at the periphery at the beginning and was trying to use it. Let's write some copy with it. Let's put the copy into Squarespace. Let's do this with it. Oh, this is so cool. Let's try some sentiment analysis just as like a fun thing to do. Let's do this and it was sort of on the periphery, right? What I said this year was I'm all in. Like I want to go full stack. Like let's just see what happens. And I think what I'm gonna learn as I sort of, and I'm in the sense you can tell this is really fun to do this with you because I'm like making sense of it as I explain it to you, is like maybe the obvious thing is I want to go and do all these things. Like I want to do 100 prototypes. That is a great goal. But going straight to 100 with then, a fully, 0 to production level prototype and a full agentic implementation, that I was stacking up a lot of things that were like, let's go at light speed. Great. That was super fun. That was a great journey. It taught me a lot about the tools. It taught the students a lot about it. They were all very thankful, luckily, because I got very high ratings at Stanford because they're all like, this class, I got to use all these tools. This is amazing. All my other classes are saying you're not allowed. So this was really, I feel like I can get a job now. And a lot of them said, it's like, I can answer in an interview. I can actually do this stuff. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be, what if there's a path of let's use AI for one particular task, but let's use it at scale, and then let's see how that plays out. I also think the aspect of human review is not just like, oh, we need to have more time for it. There's actually something pretty thoughtful about that, which was uncovered, which you need to know if you're doing these types of activities. You need to have confidence with your team that we are seeking insights and we understand what we're looking for. And we understand also the limitations of some of these tools. To me, they drove a lot of the founders in the startup environment away from the interactions with their customers, meaning they spend a lot more time in front of their computer screen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's a thing for early stage work in a company or any place. It's like you need to be doing stuff, getting it out with the customer, but being there with them, watching them interact. So,
are you interested in having a further conversation around this? Because I've got a few thoughts and experiences. So,
thank.
All right.
So Dan, you had the last word there. Love. So drop your sort of digits either directly to Perry or in the chat. I want to thank everybody for joining. We have, I know we've exceeded the time by a couple of minutes. I want to share a couple quick thoughts. One. William Gibson, one of my favorite sort of philosopher futurists, says the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. And part of our journey today was to really understand what Perry is doing inside the university using these AI tools, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. And the other thing that I would say is we build a community. We're going to be coming back and saying hello and trying to drive some of these. We do not have all the answers. we have lots of questions, and together we can sort of co-create a future that could be really, really interesting and exciting. With that, I want to thank my colleague Zamir again for his great work in pulling us together. And I want to wish you a good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you.